training call for valued merchant services, our VMS Connect virtual terminal, and payment gateway. And so we will get started here. Okay, so one of the reasons that we use this system is as most of you go around and you're soliciting and prospecting new merchants, you'll see a lot of businesses are still using standalone terminals where they swipe the card, print out a 2¼ inch thermal receipt, copy for the customer as well, and that's what they've got. But nowadays, there are certain business types where that solution is just outdated, antiquated, whatever you want to call it. There's much better options with the technology we have today. So case in point, probably the most applicable business type for this virtual terminal solution, and this system will actually do quite a few things, is the medical industry. For those of you who have talked to me one-on-one, we have upwards of an 80% close ratio. If we get in front of any type of a medical office or practice that is using a standalone terminal, and they'll allow us 10 minutes to show them this presentation, we have an over 80% close ratio of getting the business and them opting into using this system as opposed to what they're using. So this demo can be done for a business in about 10 minutes. I'm going to take a little bit longer than that because we're going to go through just about everything on here just to show everybody all the different capabilities and functionality. So let's say that you are just a basic general practitioner medical office. And we'll say that hypothetically to start out you're using a standalone terminal, say a VX520. Well, most medical offices take about a 50-50 split of payments face-to-face and payments over the phone. So payments done face-to-face, it's, using a terminal is not that big of a deal. Although if somebody does want an electronic copy of a receipt, let's say they have a habit of losing paper receipts or they just don't want one nowadays since everything is digital, there's a lot of people that would much rather have an electronic receipt versus a paper one. With a standalone terminal, you don't have an option for that unless you want to make a copy of the receipt and scan it, email it, or fax it to the patient. What happens with this system is, I guess just to back up, right? So let's say somebody calls in and wants to make a payment. They get an invoice in the mail from the medical office. They want to make a payment. They get on the phone. They call in. Typically, a doctor's office only has one standalone terminal, so the receptionist most likely has to get up, walk over, hand key in the credit card number and the expiration date. Usually, they're not in a position or the terminal is not set up to capture the address and the zip code and the security code on the card. And so when you hand key in a transaction and you don't key in the billing address and zip code attached to that card and the security code on the back, it actually will downgrade to a lower rate or a higher rate, but a lower classification. So instead of going through at a qualified rate, most of them will downgrade to a non-qualified rate, which can be a difference of over 1%, sometimes up to 2% difference between a qualified rate and a non-qualified rate. Plus the fact that if somebody wants a receipt and you're hand keying them into a standalone terminal, it goes back to the options that we already talked about, which is to take that receipt to the copier, make a copy, and then scan it and email it, which is a hassle, or fax it to somebody. But as most of you know, most patients or just consumers in general do not have a fax machine. So it becomes a hassle. So if you're a doctor's office and you have our system, it's a web-based system, so no information, the actual, application to use this or any cardholder data or information, none of that is ever downloaded and stored on any local servers or computers. It's web-based. Each individual within a practice can have their own username and password at no additional cost. We have full-blown major hospitals that use this system that have 300 different users that log in. And so they'll log in. If they've got somebody on the phone, we'll just walk through a sample sale. So they'll click on sale. It'll take them to this page. The red asterisks represent the required information, okay? So we'll just enter in a sample card number, sample expiration date, let's say a $250 invoice. Now, at that point, that's all that is, required to run a card. It's not all that's recommended. So typically, you would want to come down here to where it says the billing address, and you would type in the patient's name, their billing address. We'll send an email here so I can show you how it works. And then down here at the bottom, there's a button that says send receipt email. So when they come down here and they click charge, you get a real-time approval or decline, just like you would get on a terminal. It'll either say transaction successful up here, or it will say transaction declined if for some reason it didn't go through. And now you have an option, right? You've got the customer or the patient on the phone. You can tell them, thank you, your transaction went through. If you check your inbox, you'll have a copy of the receipt email. And so I'll pull over here my email. And so this is what a typical emailed receipt looks like. And so the merchant account, it'll have the business's name that ran your card. It'll have the date and time. It'll have the transaction amount. Most medical offices will choose to put in an invoice number or a patient number, something that ties this transaction into their practice management system. It'll show the response type that it was approved. It'll show all the information that was entered into the system. And then at this point, with this system, you can do a couple different things. So this virtual terminal has what's called a customer vault. So we could click on this button, and we'll get into how all that works in a minute. But basically, it'll store in a PCI-compliant fashion. PCI stands for Payment Card Industry. And so for those of you who are new to the industry, merchants who accept credit cards have to go through what's called PCI compliance. In order to be compliant, there's what's called an SAQ, which stands for Self-Assessment Questionnaire, that they have to go through, which basically asks them some questions about their credit card processing practices, where, do they store cardholder data outside of PCI compliant systems or hardware, so on and so forth. And if they go through and answer all the questions successfully, then they're considered what's called PCI compliant. So this system, since there is no cardholder data that's actually stored on the business owner's computers or servers, the term is they're removed from the scope of PCI compliance. None of their hardware or software is storing anything, and so they're covered. So if we click this, we could save the patient's name, billing address, zip code, card number, expiration date. It'll store everything except for the security code on the card. And then so for subsequent transactions, you could pull up that information and bill a customer for subsequent payments or invoices that they might receive. If for some reason they want something faxed, you can click on this button here that says print receipt. You can print out this receipt on a full-page piece of paper, or we have access to the Epson or Star printers that will also integrate with this system that'll print out a 3-inch thermal copy receipt as well. And then we can create a subscription, which we'll get into as well, which is basically recurring billing. So if you had, I've never come across a medical office that doesn't have an accounts receivable that somebody's working. And so for those of you who aren't aware of that, accounts receivable is a list of people that owe the practice money. And this system is great for that, because let's say you have a patient that owes $1,000, right? And they don't have $1,000, which is why they owe the business $1,000. You can use this system to set up an automated billing, so you don't have to continue to make those uncomfortable collection calls. And so if somebody owed $1,000, you could call them up and say, look, we understand you don't have $1,000. We would like to clear this from our books. Would you be okay with $50 a month? You know, if you'll commit to $50 a month, we'll bill that to you automatically until this $1,000 has been recovered. Okay? And we'll get into how that works as well in just a minute. But questions on this so far? Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask you a question, please?
Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, is this is compatible with like third-party software like Quicken or anything like that? If they want to integrate it, integrate it with their present bookkeeping software?
Yes, it is compatible with QuickBooks. So if you see down here where it says like other services, yeah, I'll show you how it works with QuickBooks.
Yeah. Also, I was thinking, like last year, I was talking to a few like large apartment complexes. With I'm trying to get them to get onto virtual, the virtual terminal like this, similar to this anyway. And what I was thinking, I was pitching the merchant was that this would be easier for your bookkeeping, maybe easier for your for your tenants, because instead of them having to come into the office to make the payment, when they get a chance, they could do it at work, they could do it on their phone, they could do it wherever they want to. Is this available? Can we set this up so the actual client themselves, not the client, but the customer themselves, or this in my case, the tenant, that they could go on the web themselves and do it, make their payment monthly themselves. Is that possible?
Yes, absolutely, and we'll get into that as well. So we have hundreds of apartment complexes. We have property management companies, which we actually use a different system for, but I'll get into that in a minute. Medical billing offices. But basically, let's say you owned an apartment complex and you had somebody that comes in on a 12-month lease. You would just come in here and, we'll get into the electronic check here in a second. You just take their routing number and their account number, you punch it into this system, then say, okay, bill this checking account $800 every month for the next 12 months. And it pulls their rent automatically.
Payments too. That's perfect.
Yeah, it does. Yep. And we'll get into that as we go down. Okay, so again, from the other reason that people use this is for reporting. Okay, so same scenario. Let's say you're a medical office. Right now, people are starting to do their taxes. So let's say that they, are going through their medical expenses for 2016, and they can't find one that they knew they were there, but they can't figure out what card they put it on. So they call up one of our businesses that's using this system, and they say, hey, look, I'm trying to find this transaction. It was sometime in March. I can't find my credit card statement. I need some details, okay? So they come down here to reports. They go to the customer's last name, type in the customer's last name, click on the date range that they're looking for, hit submit, and the system will pull up every transaction that they've ever run for that customer. And so let's say they're looking for something back in February of 2016. They click on the transaction ID. They pull up email receipt, type in the patient's email address, and boom, they've just resent the electronic receipt to that patient. So they have all the info. That'll show them a truncated card number so they can figure out what card they put it on, the date, the time. It even shows the IP address from where the transaction originated.
Is there a dummy account set up so I could actually show, demo this on my iPad in front of the merchant?
Yep.
Or would I have to do it on their system?
No, yeah, you can do it on any browser. I'll give you guys the demo login when we're done here.
All right.
And then, so again, medical offices are typically using this in conjunction with the practice management software, where they have account IDs or patient ID numbers, which can go into this field, plus an invoice number, whatever it is that they need to use that will help them down the road from reporting. So if they had patient numbers and they were putting that into this field, when they went and did reporting, they just typed in the patient number instead of the person's name. So, okay, questions on that before we move on? Okay. So authorization, well, we'll get into that in a second, but refund and void, for those of you who don't know the difference, voids are used for same day if you need to cancel out a transaction before the system has closed out or batched out. So this system, by default, batches out at 11 p.m. local time, wherever the business owner is that's using it. We have the ability to change that time if they want to batch out prior to the next day funding cutoff time. And so we can have that option for them. So if they have a transaction that they need to cancel out before it batches out, they would use void. And basically all that does is it cancels out the actual authorization number. Refund is separate. If it's after the fact, after the system is already batched out, they'd use a refund, which creates a whole new transaction, but it appears as a credit instead of a debit onto the person's account. Authorization and capture are used for like party rental, right? So let's say somebody's coming, they're picking up 50 tables and 200 chairs, and they want to do a $2,000 deposit. They would go here to authorize, and basically they're just putting a hold on someone's card. They're not actually taking the money, but they're doing an authorization. And should the person choose not to bring back the items, then they would do a capture, and then they would take the $2,000. But for most businesses, that's not applicable. Okay, electronic check is just as it sounds. So this system, you can take a credit card, a debit card, checking account, or savings account. So I'll show you how that works. Name on the account. And then we have the option here to choose personal or business checking, or personal or business account, and then checking or savings. Same thing, amount, same availability to email and electronic receipt. So the difference is that when you run a credit card or a debit card, you get a real-time approval or decline, meaning that this system actually connects with the bank or the financial institution that issued the card, and it actually retrieves information from that institution as to whether or not there are enough funds available to cover the transaction. When you do an electronic check, the same system does not exist, and so there is no way to get a real-time approval or decline running an ACH payment. And so you run the risk of finding out 3 or 4 days later that they might not have had enough money to cover the transaction that you're running. For those of you who have been on our website, you've probably seen that we do have a check guarantee product, which will allow someone to take a paper check, run it through a piece of hardware that we provide them, and get a real-time approval or a decline. And so they know with 100% surety before they give up their product or perform their service that they're going to get their money. And so we can talk about that after this call or at a later time if there's future questions. Okay, so recurring billing. Same thing, recurring billing can be done on a credit card, debit card, or a check. Just for the demonstration purposes, we'll do this. So our recurring billing has some features that most systems don't have. Okay, so let's just use a very simple one that says, medical office, they owe $500. They don't have $500, but they can commit to pay $50 a month until the balance is taken care of, okay? So we have the ability to come down here and say we want to charge the customer every X number of days. The more frequently used one is this one, where we say, okay, we're going to charge the customer on the 3rd of every month or every other month. You can do it weekly, whatever whatever the frequency is. I'll throw out some examples that we've used this for in the past. But most people by default tend to pick the 1st or the 15th, but historically speaking, those have some of the highest decline rates of any day of the month. Typically, the best 2 days to do a recurring billing for the highest approval rate would be the 3rd or the 17th, with the logic that most people get paid on the 1st and the 15th. So 2 days after that, you have the best chance of actually finding somebody with money in their account. So we have 2 options down here. We either say, click on this and say, charge them $50 on the 3rd of every month until I tell you to cancel, or this particular instance, we know that they owe us $500. So we're just going to charge them $50 on the 3rd of every month 10 times. And then we get to choose the starting date, which most systems don't have. Their only option is just to start at the day you entered in. But let's say somebody's in the clinic or the doctor's office and they make a payment on their card, but they agree to start next month on this $50 on the recurring billing. The other feature that this system has is that it will, if it tries to run the card on the 18th and it declines, it'll try it on the 19th and the 20th. It'll try it up to 3 days in a row. If it declines all 3 days, then the admin on the account will get an email that says, this customer's payment has declined 3 days in a row. You need to seek alternative form of payment from them. And you have the ability down here to save plans. So, like as an example, we have, there's tons of different types of businesses that use this, like landscaping, right? So we've got some, I have some personal investment properties. So the people that do the neighborhood there, I contacted them and set them up on this system. And so, now they've got about 1,000 customers where they just bill them for their lawn care year round. They do lawn care in the summer, snow removal in the winter. Anybody that does a recurring billing, whether it's a ISP, an internet service provider, even medical does there's a lot of medical with issues with insurance. There's a lot of doctor's offices that allow people to pay $50 a month that gives them and their family up to 2 or 3 doctor's visits per month, and they'll use this system to bill them on a monthly basis. Apartment complexes, again, any sky's the limit. Pest control, home security companies, cable companies, dish companies. And so, all right, questions on that? Okay. So you can also click here where it says list subscriptions, and it'll show you all of the recurring billing setups you have. It'll show you how many you have total, how many have been attempted, how many payments have been collected. It will change color as the expiration dates approach. So if it turns yellow, it's telling you that this card's going to expire within 30 days. If it turns salmon color, it's telling you that the card has already expired. Also, just about anything that you can view in here can be exported into an Excel file or a CSV file as well. Questions on that? Okay. Customer Vault we've already touched on. It's pretty basic. It basically stores all the person's information for payments. And so if somebody's in the system and they call up next month and they say, I want to pay my invoice, the person, the receptionist pulls up their account in their practice management system and says, okay, I show you have, $247.53 due. Would you like us to put that on the card that we have on file? Yes, I would. That's great. And they'll come in here to list customers, type in the person's name, pull it up, hit submit, and it charges them, sends them a receipt instantaneously. Okay, moving on to invoices. This is probably, I'm not aware of any other virtual terminals that have this feature. And so this is an amazing feature that we a great selling point for a lot of prospective customers. So anybody that's sending out paper invoices know that the turnaround time on collecting money on paper invoices is less than ideal, right? Typically, they have to generate a list of invoices. They send that over to whoever's doing their invoices. Some people do it in-house. Some people farm it out. Then they have to wait for them to do a batch of invoicing. Got to pay for the envelopes, the paper, the stuffing, the postage, wait 3 or 4 days, sometimes longer for it to get to where it's going. Usually it sits around for a few days and then takes a few days to get back. But what if there was a way to send an email with an invoice that could be paid right from the person's computer? So let's say we've got a $500 invoice amount. We're not giving them terms, so it's due upon receipt. And we come down here. You can also, business owners can add basically product SKUs, pricing in here, anything that they want. And so we've got a couple just demo ones in here. So let's say somebody orders 25 hair gel bottles for $176.50. So we'll change this. Okay, we'll put in an email address. And so what this does, it sends out an email, which I'll pull up here in just a second. So basically, it sends out an email with 2 things in it. Excuse me. It sends out an attachment, which is a PDF file, which actually shows the invoice, which I will bring up here. And so up here, it'll say whatever the business name is. And we can change, obviously, if we would have put the customer's name, address, everything in there. You can list all of your item descriptions. You can put tax, shipping. And so the customer sees, okay, the invoice is $176.50. What is listed here matches with what I bought. They go back to the email, and it has a payment link that says basically click here to pay your invoice. It won't work because it's a demo account, but basically when you click that link, it takes the customer to basically a customer-facing page that looks comparable to this. And so they have the ability to enter in their credit card number, debit card number, or checking or savings account info and make a payment right from their email. As soon as they make that payment, provided that it's approved, they'll get an email instantaneously back saying, your account or your payment was approved and you're all set. This invoice was paid for. And so using this saves any business that's sending paper invoices, saves them a tremendous amount of time and money, right? I mean, if you think about it, this gets emailed out. Most, and I say most, obviously not everybody, but most people check their email on a daily basis. If not, most people check it frequently. And then it's so much easier to make this payment as opposed to getting a paper invoice, and either you have basically 2 options, right? Either get out your checkbook and write a check, or wait until you've got the time to call up the place and make the payment over the phone, which, let's be honest, most people don't like calling anybody anymore. They'd rather text or do something on the computer, which is why this option works very well for a lot of businesses. All right, questions on that?
This is what I was talking about, for like the tenants in an apartment building. They can actually, if the manager or the manager of the complex sends them out an invoice, they can just click on the link and make the payment that way. This way here.
Yeah, you could, but what we'll get to. Yeah, there's a better scenario for what you're talking about, and we'll get to that in just a second. Sorry, but yes, you could do that. You could have your receptionist go through and create invoices every month and send those out and make the payment. But there's actually a much easier solution for that.
All right.
Okay, so questions on invoices or anything that we've covered up to invoicing? Remember, no question's a bad question. If you have a question, I'll bet you somebody else has the same question, so you'd be doing them a favor by asking it.
Is there any plans on if, okay, you show somebody or walk somebody through this demo? You know, of course, some people will never tell you if they really get it or not. Is there any plans or thoughts on maybe being able to send them a step-by-step how-to in video form? If they continue to review like we're talking about.
That's a great question. So if we come down here at the bottom, if you see my cursor,
yep,
for video tutorials. Excuse me, I have a cough here. So it has some very basic videos that they can look at on how to do things.
Okay. All right.
So to be honest with you, we have thousands of customers that use this. We've got people anywhere from, 17-year-old employees all the way up to the oldest person that I know of that we've ever trained was an 87-year-old receptionist at a cancer clinic. And, I mean, it really is, it's user-friendly, right? I mean, you really can't mess up because you have these required fields. And so worst case, somebody might forget to put the billing address and zip code in there, but we also have the ability in settings to make any one of these fields required, which a lot of businesses do. And so it really, I've never had anybody, I've had people not get it on the first go through, but I've never had anybody really not understand it. Anybody at least that's, had experience taking credit and debit card payments, because all you need is the card number, the expiration date, and the amount. And it's pretty self-explanatory, but yes, there are video tutorials for people that need it. And then we offer training. So as an example, we do a lot of big medical offices and full-blown hospitals. And so for one of the hospitals we did, one of the requirements for them to come on board with us is that we had a weekly training via WebEx. That any one of they've got 1,000 employees. Any one of their employees could get on. We promised to do it live to make someone available. So every Wednesday at 8 a.m., we had a call set up like this, and any one of their employees could get on for a brush up or an initial training, whatever it might be. And so we're happy to, we're probably not going to. I probably wouldn't be able to commit that we do that for any account, but, we definitely have the ability to do it. But we're happy to at least do one or two live trainings for anybody. We can send out emails. We've had 500 people on here before watching these demos. Okay. So let's go. Okay, so on top of this, let's go to this. I think this will be helpful. So I'm into reports here. I want to show you the different sources that this system can utilize. Okay, so there was a question about an apartment complex and tenants making their own payments. Same thing with medical, right? So people that don't want to call in, and let's say the medical office doesn't want to take the time to create these electronic invoices. So this system also has an API, which stands for Application Program Interface, and that is the system that's needed to tie this to a website. Okay, so let's say you had a toy store or shoe store that's selling shoes online. They would use this system integrated with a shopping cart to be able to sell those shoes online. And so for a medical office or a hospital or an apartment complex, they would have access to this API. It doesn't cost anything extra. And they would put a link on their site that says, click here to pay your invoice or click here to pay your rent. And at any time, a tenant or a patient can log on, click on it, type in their invoice number if they're a patient or the unit number if it's an apartment complex, and they can pay their rent via credit card, debit card, or checking or savings account. And so for the rent, what's that?
I was just going to ask, does Value Merchant Services actually do the integration themselves, or do we have to, as agents, have to get somebody, a tech guy, to do it for them, or to help them with it, or do they have to do it themselves, or do we do it like a company?
That's a good question. So there are most people that have a website that would want to use it have a web guy. It's very easy if you go down here to integration, click on that link. There's everything that a web person would need to integrate this API into their website. So we prefer that they do it, but to answer your question, we do have people that will do it. We don't do it for free because we usually farm it out. Usually I think they charge like $85 an hour. The reason that we don't want to do it is for liability, not necessarily for liability reasons, but if for something goes wrong, they, people tend to blame, point the finger. So, but anybody who has made a website or who is familiar with making websites could click on this link and figure it out.
All right.
And they can build their own form for whatever they need, right? If it's an apartment complex, you'd want something that says, tenant name, unit number, and a drop down as to which month they want this rent applied to. All of that stuff is very easy. But yes, we do have consultants available. Usually we'll share with them this integration link. If that doesn't do it, we can offer the services. But typically it doesn't take more than an hour, 2 tops, to tie in the API to somebody's website. So in the scheme of things, it's not really that expensive if they need some help with it. Okay, so the reason I showed you this screen is, again, to show you all the different functionalities of this system beyond just the virtual terminal where they can take payments over the phone. One thing I didn't mention is we also have a USB swiper that'll plug into any USB port. And so if it's a doctor's office, typically they have USB ports. So if they do a payment face-to-face, they can swipe the card and run it as a card-present transaction, therefore capturing a better rate. Any credit or debit card transaction, if you take it in a face-to-face environment and swipe it, as opposed to hand keying it in, it's going to qualify for a better rate. But again, this will show you all the different options for using this system. So batch upload would be, let's say you had a spreadsheet that had 100 credit card numbers, the expiration date, the amounts, and the person's name. You could take that spreadsheet, upload it into this system, and it'll run all of those payments all at once. Not utilized very often, but it does work. As with any API system, on a website, you're going to need access to a shopping cart. So we have access to a couple free shopping carts, plus it'll integrate with other shopping carts out there if they're actually selling products, multiple products within one, in one sale. QuickBooks, we'll talk about that in a second. This system will interface with QuickBooks, and I'll show you how. And you got recurring billing. So if you picked a date range, let's say for the last 90 days up here, this would show you everything that the API would show you all customer-initiated transactions that originated on your website would show up here, the total revenue, everything that came via a shopping cart, everything that came through on your recurring billing. Swipe is everything that is swiped through a USB swiper. Virtual terminal is going to show you everything that's been hand keyed into the system. And then iProcess Mobile is we have a free app that can be downloaded on any Apple or Android device and most tablets. And then they use the same username and password that they use on the computer to log into this system to log into the app on the phone. And then we have the swipers that plug into the phone and they can run payments on that as well. And so there's a lot of different applications for that, whether it's, medical. You've got, we have some medical places that check people out in the room, so you don't have to, people that really want their privacy, or let's say you have like a plastic surgery or a place that does cosmetic surgery that kind of want to be on the down low. They don't want to check out at a desk where there's, 20 patients and say, okay, you owe us $1,500, and having people wonder what it is that you spent $1,500 on. So they'll download our app on their mobile device or an iPad, take it into the room, swipe their card, email them a receipt, and they're out the door. So it makes things a little bit more private, a little bit more efficient. We have hospitals that have mobile clinics that drive around to different events. They need mobile options. We've got plumbing companies that have, 50 techs. Instead of getting them, calling in the payments and paying a higher rate, or buying a very expensive all-in-one wireless unit, which can run upwards of $700 or $800. They get them a little swiper that plugs into their phone or their iPad, and they can take payments right then and there on the spot. So the great thing about this is, from a reporting standpoint, everything feeds into one. So case in point, on like a hospital, we have hospitals that do millions of dollars a month. And as you know, hospitals have different departments, right? They have admissions, they have the emergency room, they have x-ray, they've got labs, sometimes they have clinics, coffee shops, cafeterias. And so if they're on standalone terminals, then at the end of each day, somebody has to take all of those paper receipts plus the batch report and hand deliver it to whoever is in charge of keeping track of those numbers, right? And if something is missing or it doesn't match up, it's a hassle. So with this system, whoever's on the admin end can log in and see everything. One login, and they can see how much the coffee shop did yesterday, how much the cafeteria did. Was there a question? Okay. They can see everything. They can see what came through on their website, and it centralizes all of their reporting into one very easy-to-use system. And then customer service, right? If somebody calls in and says, hey, I was in the cafeteria and I need my receipt for my taxes or to turn into my boss, instead of having to dig through all of those paper receipts, which would be virtually impossible, right? Because you have hundreds, if not thousands, of receipts every day from all those different entities. They jump into this system, type in their name, and they email them a copy of their receipt, and they've got it covered. So I'm sure most of you can imagine, how exciting this would be to somebody who's digging through paper receipts every day to make sure that they reconcile, as opposed to jumping in here, downloading everything into a spreadsheet and sorting everything within 5 seconds.
Hi, I am
calling
from Wesme Janitorial on behalf of Wesme Government.
As far as the QuickBooks, quick, we've got some background noise. If you're having a separate call, if you could mute your line, that would be great. Okay, thank you. Okay. So as far as the QuickBooks go, we get this question a lot, right? People use QuickBooks. They don't want to do their processing within QuickBooks because they charge an arm and a leg above and beyond what most processors would charge.
My name is Ronald Bolton, and I'm calling back to follow up on a voicemail that I received.
Again, if you are having another call in the background, if you could either hang up or mute your line, I would appreciate it. That way you're not messing with the integrity of our call. Let me see if I can figure out who it is. Let's see. So I think we got Ron. I'm going to mute your line, Ron. I apologize, but we don't want to have to compete with what else you got going on. Okay. So as far as the QuickBooks go, most people do this on a weekly basis, but they'll come in here and they'll choose the date range where they want to pull the transaction. So let's say you wanted to do the 1st to the 17th. You hit submit. And again, this is a demo account, so it's not going to pull, but it'll basically create a QuickBooks Ready CSV file that can then be imported into QuickBooks. and it'll dump all of the information that you put into this system into QuickBooks.
So instead of actually integrating it with QuickBooks, they can do the payments in here and just use a CSV file and just import it right into their normal, whatever they use for accounting or whatever, right?
Correct.
Whatever program they're using for their office. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
All right.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's got to be QuickBooks, right? If they're using like a separate, like Peachtree or Sage, it's not going to integrate. I mean, it might. We have the ability to create different Excel spreadsheets, but, this link here is specifically for QuickBooks.
All right, gotcha.
So, and then we do have, of course, customer service that can help with that if they've got some questions on that. Okay, questions on that? Questions on anything that we've discussed?
Yeah, you
anything
said there
that you want more detail?
Yeah, you said there was an app that is there an app that I can actually download on my iPad that I could use to demo this in front of the merchant, or would I have to go to the website and demo it from the website?
Yeah, to do a demo like we've done today in a shortened form, you'd have to pull this up on a browser. Is the only way to do it. The app only is for making payments via a mobile device. If you wanted to make payments on your iPhone or your Droid phone, you can download the app and make payments via that way.
Like there's this photographer I was talking to about a virtual terminal. Now he would use the app for taking payments too. Like say for instance he's on a shoot somewhere. He goes to conventions and does shoots for people. Takes pictures of people. If he's at a convention, he could just use the app while he's there, just to process whatever payments he needs at the actual event. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. We have several photographers that use this. Usually, they use three different things. Number one, they'll use the mobile app if they're out on shoots with on a wedding, because if they do a wedding, let's say, and it's $5,000. And they have the ability to swipe the card versus hand keying it in, that could save them almost 2%. 2% on $5,000 is definitely worth having a swiper. And then a lot of times they'll tie it to their website. A lot of photographers will give you the option to order additional prints. And so you go on their website, you order the print that you want and pay for it right on your website. And so this system gives you an all-in-one service to do all of those things.
Yeah, it's much more extensive than any other virtual terminal I've ever seen. Looks good. All right, thanks.
Thank you. You bet. Okay, so we do have a couple other virtual terminals that we use, and let me explain why. So let's say that you've got, and it works for medical and automotive. So a lot of larger car dealerships, especially if you get into one that has a, fairly wealthy or affluent owner, we find from time to time where, any car that's under $10,000, they do in-house financing. Okay. And so we came across a sizable a Toyota dealership that was doing, about $700,000 or $800,000 a month in processing. And they had that, instituted where if a car was $10,000 or less, they did in-house financing. Owner used his money, and they would, pick the term and the appropriate interest rate somewhere between, usually 8 and 20%, and they would bill weekly. And so, as we're going through, the owner was interested, and so he said, okay, well, I want you to, actually it was us that said we want to talk to everybody that makes payments. Anybody that takes a credit card or debit card, we want to talk to that person to make sure that we fit them with the best product or service for them. So we came across this lady where every Friday she spent 8 hours, her entire day on Friday, sitting in front of a credit card terminal, and she had a folder beside her with, I think it was about 300 pages that had credit card numbers, expiration dates, security codes, and customer names, and she would go through and hand key in all of these credit card numbers for their weekly car payment. And I couldn't even, it obviously just, boggled my mind to see that. What a waste of time, number one, and what a tedious task, right? Keying in all of those numbers. You do the math, the credit card numbers are 16 digits long, got 300 card numbers every week. And so, we told her we have a system where you enter them in once. You enter in the amount, the original purchase amount, the term, and the interest rate, and our system will create an amortization table. And then you either type in a credit card number, debit card number, or checking or savings account info, and you choose the frequency. If you want to bill them every Friday, that's fine. You do it once, and this system will automatically bill them until the amortization table zeroes itself out. And so, that was just one thing that we did for them, freed up an entire day. She hated doing that, but as far as they were concerned, they had no idea that a better system existed. Plus, they were in heavy breach of PCI compliance because they had hundreds of credit card numbers and expiration dates just sitting in a file folder in an unlocked file cabinet, which would put them in severe trouble if that information got compromised.
And that would be good for if a furniture store that does, self-financing, or maybe a car dealership that does self-financing, something like that. Like, for instance, your job. I know there's a lot of commercials around here anyway for places that have, your job is your credit. And if, you come in and you pay X amount every week or X amount every 2 weeks, this would be a good application for that, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And then inside the medical industry, typically once medical debt gets past 180 days, they start to assess interest. And so that system can also be used for that as well. And then the other thing that this other virtual terminal that we use does is that it works really well for medical billing or property management companies. Okay, so what it does is, let's say you've got a property management company and you bill for 100 different owners. Okay, so it takes a little bit of time to set it up, but basically you would take, let's say you have owner, John Smith that owns 5 properties, right? And then you have Ben Smith that owns another 5 properties. Well, you go in and you enter in John Smith's checking account info into his slot, and then so when it's time for all of John Smith's tenants to be billed, the money goes directly into his account, and then all of Ben Smith's properties goes directly into his account, and so it allows you to bill for separate people. So medical billing, same thing, right? You might have a medical billing company that bills for 100 doctors. Well, if you have a patient that calls in who wants to pay an invoice, there's a drop down that shows all the different doctor's offices. You click on the doctor's office for where the patient's calling, and then it takes you to a page that's comparable to what you see on my screen still, but you bill for that specific doctor, and then the money goes into the doctor's account, that specific doctor, which makes life so much easier. And so same thing, right? On that, we have a closing ratio upwards of 80%. For those types of accounts, just because the other options out there are pretty grim based on what we have available for them.
And that's a different virtual terminal system than this one right here, than this one. Is that correct? Completely different one?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I can probably set up a different demo. I don't have enough time to jump into a demo. I apologize. We got started late with some tech issues, but I can set up another demo call if there's enough interest in seeing that.
That's a good idea, because I was just in the doctor's office earlier this week, because I just got with the flu, and I noticed they had a change since last time I was there. Before they had all the doctors or all the patients going to one window, and now they have 2 windows with, X amount of doctors on this side, X amount of doctors on that side. This would be perfect for that. That application would be perfect for those guys, I think. Good idea.
Yeah, absolutely it would. Yeah. Okay, questions on, you bet. Thank you for the question. All right, other questions before we wrap up? Again, I apologize that this has lasted probably a lot longer than most people expected, but I hope it was worth the time.
Yeah, this is Ron. I want to sort of make sure I confirm what you just said. So I have a lot of property management contacts in my database. And so what you're telling me is that obviously they can now have all their tenants basically make payment this way. They can process the payment and obviously take all the different forms of payment. And there's nothing else out there that does this, or are we the easiest to work with? I'm just trying to find out the differentiator because I'm trying to imagine all those people taking all those payments and not having anything in place. So I'm just trying to make sure I set this up right.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say there's nothing else out there. Like there's property management software, but typically those property management software companies will only allow you to work with one processor, okay? And the reason they only integrate with one processor is they've built in, a decent amount of margin for themselves to be able to make a piece on the credit card processing end. And so for property management, right, I mean, a lot of times they're working on, 7 to 10%, right, of the gross rent. And so making sure that they're not paying any more than they absolutely have to is key. And we've shown the system that I'm talking about to several property management companies, and they jump on it very quickly, just because it's easy to use, it's less expensive than what other options are out there. I mean, let's say that, I have a good friend of mine that owns a property management company. Somebody comes in and they allow people to pay rent on a credit card. Somebody comes in to pay rent on a credit card. All they got to do is get in our system, click on the drop down for the owner of that particular place, take the card, swipe it, and the payment's made. Receipt emailed, and it's just very simple.
Mm-hmm. Hey, do you have a link for the demo, like so that we can I could play with this thing?
Yeah. So let's see here. I'll throw this up here. So the easiest thing would be if everybody just, I don't have a way to pull everybody. If everybody just sends me an email that says virtual terminal demo link in the subject line, then you'll get a response back that has the link and the username and password. So that's probably the easiest. I'm going to throw out my contact info here because I think there's a couple people that I haven't spoken to directly. But again, for those of you who might have joined late, my name's Sean. I do a lot of our sales training, so if you have a need for that, we can talk one-on-one anytime. There are several people on this call that I have spoken to one-on-one, and I would hope that those calls have been beneficial. I can also help you generate an income plan. So if you get me on the phone, you tell me how much money you want to make, I can help you lay out a plan down to the, basically the time that you need to be out on the doors every day in order to make that much money, how many accounts it would take. We can lay all of that out. So my direct number to call me or text me on is 208-243-0005. And my email address is Sean, SEAN, @valuedmerchants.com. That's valued with a D, merchants with an S.com. For those of you who want to jump on this demo a little earlier, again, if I know there's people on here that are not in front of their computer. So if you listen to this recording, you send me an email to Sean, SEAN, @valuedmerchants.com. In the subject line, put virtual terminal demo login, and I'll send it to you. For those of you who are on the screen right now, the URL, you have to type in https://secure.valuedmerchantgateway.com. The username you see here is Sean's Dog Grooming. The girl in our office that set this up thought it'd be funny if it said that. I don't know that I agree, but it would take too much time to change it. The password to log into the demo is capital N as in Nancy, lowercase j as in Jackrabbit, 0780123. I also just typed it into a notepad here on the screen if you're on the computer. And so you're welcome to log into that and mess with it. Click on the links. There's a ton of info. You can practice. And then usually it takes, 2 or 3 versions of me going through this with you, and then you'll be comfortable to show it to somebody else or do a demo like I've just done. Okay, questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, you're going to have some time on Monday to, I'm going to try to get on this weekend and learn some about it, but you're going to have any time Monday to help me get up to speed so I can actually pitch it like Tuesday or Wednesday?
Yeah,
and
absolutely. When we're done, call me or shoot me a text. I got a meeting, so shoot me a text, and then we'll set up a time for Monday. I'm in the office all day. I've got some meetings. But 208-243. Yeah, it's 208-243-0005. My cell. Call me or text me. Yeah, okay. Sean Ruppel. So SEAN, last name's Ruppel, R-U, P as in Paul, P as in Paul, E as in Echo, L as in Larry. And just so most of you are aware, I spend probably 80% of my day on the phone with agents that are trying to close deals, right? You get in front of a deal and you just can't get the merchant to the point where they're ready to sign. Shoot me a text that says, Sean, I'm in front of a merchant. I need your help. You can call me, put me on speakerphone, and I'm happy to talk to any merchant. Definitely not saying I'm the best salesperson out there, but I have a lot of experience selling merchant accounts. Have some good one-liners, and a lot of times all it takes is just somebody else reiterating what you just said to get them on board, and I'm happy to do that.
What time zone are you in?
Hey, Sean.
Yeah, go ahead.
Would you give out the username and password one more time real quick, please?
Yeah, you bet. So the username is Sean's Dog Grooming. It bugs me every time I say it. SEANSDOGGROOMING. Sean's Dog Grooming. And then the password is capital N as in Nancy, lowercase j as in Jackrabbit, 0780123.
Hey, Sean.
What zip code are you in? I mean, not zip code. What the area code are you in? Not area code. What am I thinking? What time zone are you in? That's what I meant to say. Time zone.
Mountain time. I'm in Idaho Falls, Idaho, which is mountain time.
And so that's what, 2 hours behind Eastern time? It's 2 hours, right?
Yes, 2 hours.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, it sounded like there was a couple other questions there in the background. Go ahead. Other questions? Okay. All right, well, I appreciate everyone being on the call. I apologize about the first 15 minutes of technical difficulties that we had. And I will look forward to everybody's call so we can do a one-on-one discussion. Okay, thanks for on the call, everybody. Have a great day and have a great weekend.
All right, take care.